What if I told you that one drone flight, just one, could put your entire drone business at risk? What if I told you that you only had 10 days to deal with it? It's not a hypothetical scenario anymore. The FAA's new DETER program has changed the game. And while some operators are calling it government overreach, others don't even realize what's coming. Either way, the way we operate our drone business just changed. And today, we're going to break down what this really means, not just for flying, but for our entire drone business strategy. That's our key focus on the special edition of Drone Pilot MBA. Thanks for joining me. Welcome back to Drone Pilot MBA, where we break down drone business strategy for the modern drone entrepreneur. Before we get into it today, it's important to set the stage. A number of drone industry influencers have already produced detailed videos breaking down the FAA's Drone Expedited and Targeted Enforcement Response Program, DETER. I've also written an article that covers the particulars from a strategic standpoint. For your convenience, I've included direct resource links in the liner notes below so you can explore those perspectives further. At the same time, we're already seeing a strong reaction across the drone community. Some operators, they're calling it government overreach. Others are questioning where this leads for consumer drone use. And for many, it simply feels like the rules are tightening up faster than expected. This reaction is understandable, but that's not where we're going to stay today. We're not here to debate opinions. We're here to understand the reality and, more importantly, how to operate strategically within it. What we're seeing right now is not random. It's a shift. It's a transition from a compliance-based environment to one defined by enforcement. And in that kind of environment, knowing the rules and following them isn't just about staying legal, it's about protecting your drone business. Because the truth is simple. The rules are going to change. The landscape will evolve. Enforcement will continue to tighten. That's expected. The real question is your business built to adapt when that happens? The shift, it's already here. For a long time, the drone industry operated in what can be described as an educational phase. Mistakes were often treated as learning opportunities rather than enforcement events. A pilot might misinterpret airspace or push a boundary and receive a warning or no response at all. And this created an environment where operators believed there was room for error. And over time, that belief developed into a false sense of margin. Many assumed that minor risks were acceptable and that consequences, they would be minimal or delayed. That mindset became normalized, even among operators running legitimate businesses. Consider a routine real estate shoot. A pilot performs similar flights regularly. During one job, he flies slightly higher than usual to improve the shot. He skips rechecking airspace because of prior experience. The flight is completed successfully. The client is satisfied. There are no immediate consequences. See, that reinforces the behavior. The pilot concludes that the decision was acceptable, and the action becomes part of their operating pattern. However, that margin no longer exists. It has been reduced. It has been eliminated. The industry now operates under accelerated enforcement. Violations can be identified, processed, and acted upon quickly. The FAA's DETER program reflects this shift in approach. And this change is not simply procedural. It represents a shift in philosophy. The focus is no longer on post-event education. No, the focus is on immediate accountability. The gap between action and consequence has narrowed. The opportunity to correct mistakes after the fact has diminished. The cost of being wrong appears faster and with greater impact. Operators who rely on past assumptions are exposed, and operators who continue to operate under the belief that there is still margin in the system are operating under outdated conditions. The 10-day ultimatum is a business problem. Consider a realistic scenario. A pilot completes a flight that appears routine. The operation feels controlled. The objectives are met. There are no interruptions and no visible issues during the flight. The pilot lands, powers down, packs up the gear, and heads home. From their perspective, the job is complete. There is no law enforcement interaction. There is no immediate indication that anything went wrong. There is no feedback loop to suggest a problem. In many cases, this is where the assumption forms. The pilot concluded that everything was acceptable. The absence of consequence is interpreted as validation. However, the environment has changed. The following day, he gets a knock at the door. A delivery arrives. It's a formal notice requiring action in 10 days. At that moment, the situation shifts. What was previously viewed as a completed operation is now an active issue. The pilot is no longer thinking about the flight itself. No way. The focus shifts to legal exposure, compliance status, and business impact. The timeline now is compressed as well. 10 days? 10 days isn't a long period when decisions carry long-term consequences. There is limited time to seek legal guidance. There's limited time to even review your flight data, your documentation, or even get into the context of it all. There's limited time to fully understand the implications of the options even available. The decision-making environment becomes constrained. And under those conditions, the operator must determine whether to accept liability, challenge the notice, or pursue another course of action. Each option carries its own implications, both immediate and long-term. This is where the issue transitions from operational to strategic. The outcome of that decision can create a permanent record associated with the business. That record can then influence future regulatory interactions, including waiver approvals and compliance evaluations. It can also influence how clients and partners perceive the business. Reliability and consistency become part of the evaluation criteria. What began as a routine flight now has the potential to affect long-term positioning. This is the core shift. The risk is no longer confined to the moment of operation. The risk extends beyond the flight and into the structure of the business itself. The presence of immediate consequences no longer indicates safety. It simply reflects a delay between action and response. In an accelerated enforcement environment, that delay is even shorter, and the response is more structured. This is why the 10-day window matters. It's not just a deadline. It's a constraint that forces rapid decision-making under pressure, often without full context or preparation. From a business perspective, this introduces a new requirement. Operators must be prepared before the issue occurs. They must maintain documentation that can be reviewed quickly. They must understand the implications of different responses. They must operate in a way that reduces the likelihood of entering that decision window at all. The objective is not to manage the 10-day ultimatum effectively. The objective is to operate in a way that avoids needing to respond to it in the first place. And that's called strategic shift. Now, there are trade-offs. At first glance, the DETER program appears beneficial. It offers faster resolution and, in many cases, reduced penalties. For an operator under pressure, that can seem like a practical solution. But the ability to resolve an issue quickly and move forward is appealing. However, that surface-level benefit hides a more important reality. Every decision made within that accelerated process carries long-term implications. When an operator chooses to accept a resolution, they're not simply closing a case. They're actually creating a formal record of violation that becomes part of their operational history. That record does not disappear. It follows the business. And from a strategic perspective, this matters. Future opportunities, particularly advanced operations such as beyond visual line of sight or operations over people, often depend on demonstrated reliability and compliance history. A documented violation can influence how that reliability is evaluated. There's also the issue of decision-making under pressure. A 10-day window compresses the ability to fully evaluate options. Legal guidance takes time. Internal review takes time, and understanding long-term implications takes time. When time is limited, decisions tend to prioritize immediate relief rather than long-term positioning. The operator gains speed but loses flexibility. The issue is resolved quickly, but future options may be constrained. This is the trade-off. In a slower system, operators had time to analyze and respond with greater control. In an accelerated system, that control is reduced, and as a result, the burden shifts to the operator before the issue occurs. The strategic question is no longer how to respond after a violation. The strategic question is how to operate in a way that prevents the need for that decision in the first place. Look, the rules are going to continue to change. We might as well fasten up. The regulatory environment will continue to evolve, and this is driven by public safety concerns, technological advancements, and increasing airspace congestion. Change is not an exception in this industry. It is the pattern. Operators who view regulatory change as disruption are often operating from a position of dependency. Their workflows and assumptions are tied too closely to current conditions. When those conditions shift, their business becomes unstable. On the other hand, a resilient business is built on adaptability, being nimble and dynamic, right? The goal is not to master the rules as they exist today. The goal is to operate in a way that remains viable as those rules change. Operators who rely on gray areas or informal practices may gain short-term efficiency. However, those same practices become liabilities when enforcement tightens and ambiguity is removed. In contrast, operators who prioritize compliance as part of their operating model experience less disruption. Their processes align with regulatory intent, which allows them to adjust rather than rebuild when change occurs. Adaptability is not reactive. It is designed. It is reflected in a system, decision-making process, and how risk is evaluated. The FAA's DETER program is not an isolated development. It's just part of a broader trend toward faster, more consistent enforcement. Operators who recognize that trend early are better positioned to respond. Operators who ignore it are more likely to experience disruption. The objection is not to predict every change. The objective is to build a business that remains functional regardless of how those changes unfold. risk management defines the business. It's often misunderstood as a checklist item performed before a flight. And in reality, it's the framework that defines how the business operates. Every decision reflects how risk is evaluated. This includes the types of projects accepted, the environment in which the operations occur, and the standards used to determine whether a flight proceeds. When risk management is secondary, decisions tend to prioritize convenience, speed, and short-term revenue. Over time, that will increase exposure. When risk management is primary, decision-making becomes deliberate. Operations become more predictable, and outcomes become more stable. This distinction becomes critical in an accelerated enforcement environment. The FAA is tracking our play. Operators are evaluated not only on their ability to complete a flight, but how consistently they operate within established rules. Consistency builds trust. Trust influences repeat work, partnerships, and access to advanced operations. Documentation plays a central role in this system. Flight logs, authorizations, and operational records provide structure and accountability. They are not administrative tasks. They are defensive assets. Before you fly, ask yourself, if I was called into court in front of a jury of my peers, would I walk free or would I be convicted as charged? In fast-moving environments, such as this enforcement environment, documentation may be the only mechanism available to clarify what really occurred during a flight. Risk management also requires acknowledging uncertainty. When variables are unclear, proceeding with a flight introduces unnecessary exposure. A disciplined operator, on the other hand, recognizes that the cost of delay is often lower than the cost of the risk. Risk management is not about avoiding work. It's about ensuring that the work performed supports long-term viability. Let's talk about the aerial strategist mindset. The distinction between a casual operator and a professional is defined by decision-making. A casual operator approaches each flight as an isolated event. The focus is on the execution in the moment. The question is whether the flight can be completed. On the other hand, a professional operator approaches each flight as part of a broader system. The question is whether the decision supports or exposes the business. See, the difference has significant implications. When decisions are made in isolation, small deviations become easier to justify. Over time, those deviations create patterns that increase exposure. In an accelerated enforcement environment, those patterns surface more quickly. The aerial strategist operates with intentionality. Each decision is evaluated for its alignment with long-term objectives. Pre-flight planning is treated as critical. Airspace is verified consistently. Documentation is maintained without exception. These actions are not driven by caution alone. They're driven by consistency, because consistency builds reliability, and then reliability builds trust, and trust supports growth. Clients and regulators evaluate patterns. That's the truth. They don't just evaluate the isolated outcomes. The aerial strategist understands that every flight contributes to that pattern. And in this environment, professionalism is not defined only by results. It's defined by how those results are achieved. The aerial strategist builds systems that produce consistent outcomes. They make decisions that protect long-term viability. That's the difference. And that difference determines who adapts and who's forced to adapt. Okay, here's your takeaway. The DETER program did not introduce risk. It exposed existing vulnerabilities. The margin for error is smaller now. The response window is shorter. The consequences are clearer. And understanding and following the rules is not simply compliance. It's a core business strategy. When regulations change, prepared operators adjust. Unprepared operators react. The objective is not to just complete flights. The objective is to protect and sustain the business behind them. You'll find a direct link to this article, FAA DETER Program, Drone Compliance, and Part 107 Risk, along with hundreds of practical drone business strategy resources at Aerial Northwest in today's show liner notes. I invite you to also like this video and subscribe to the channel for more drone business expansion insights. Remember, as we enter a new phase of the drone market, knowing what's ahead and planning accordingly will allow you to take hold of and sustain your competitive advantage. I'm Tony Moreno. I wish you all green lights. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Keep on droning. If you have any questions, let us know. If you have any comments, leave them below. If you'd like to hire us, you can get more information by visiting aerialnorthwest.com. Be smart, safe, and fly responsibly.